Stavins describes how individual transferable fish quota have gained recent popularity as a policy instrument. We can recognize this instrument as cap and trade, where a regulator sets the total amount of allowable fish quota and distributes quota based on an auction, historical catch, or some other mechanism. The regulator sets the allowable catch at Q star, and Coase showed that no matter the initial distribution of quota, that trade would lead to an efficient outcome where quota would be traded at price P star. Cap and trade is the second typical neoclassical policy measure to respond to externalities. Instead of setting a tax equal to the marginal external cost, it may be easier in some cases to directly determine sustainable production levels and letting the market determine the price of allowances. We find plenty of examples of such cap and trade outside of fisheries as well, with EU's emissions trading system perhaps being the most prominent example. Next week we will talk more about its relative merits with taxation in the context of climate change. The review by Stavins illustrates the potential of these individually transferable fish quota. First, describing the results of earlier regulation attempts, page 90 reads, "The example of the Pacific halibut fishery is illuminating. Open access had led to gradually diminishing stock throughout the 1970s. In an effort to reduce the harvest, the season was first reduced from 125 days in 1975 to 25 days in 1980, and then to just 2 days in 1994. The result, of course, was more effort expended in a shorter time. Overcapitalization of the fishery was rampant. By 1994, crews remained out for the entire 48 hours of the season, leading to high rates of injury and even mortality. Due to the rushed fishing, the bycatch of other species was exceedingly high, as was so-called ghost fishing from abandoned nets. An individual transferable quota system was established in 1995. The season length increased from 2 days to more than 200 days. Safety problems were diminished, bycatch was reduced by 80%, ghost fishing losses fell by 77%, and the quality of fish in the market increased. From 1994 to 1999, the number of fishing vessels decreased by 10%, while the value of harvest increased by 34%. Total allowable catch has not been exceeded since the inception of the program. Globally, ghost nets are unfortunately still a problem. An estimated 10% of all marine litter consists of ghost nets. Experiences with individually transferable quota systems are not unambiguously positive. The documentary film The Price of Fish gives the perspective of harmed small-scale fishermen in New Zealand. In a recent literature review, Shino and colleagues find that individual transferable quota have in general had positive sustainability and economic outcomes, yet that these programs are also often associated with distributional concerns. Stavins points out, however, that most caps are set inefficiently lenient. As you may recall from the figure, the economic efficient outcome would be a catch below the maximum sustainable yield. Yet, as Stavins describes on page 89, the most frequent regulatory approach has been to limit annual catches, with the target typically being the maximum sustainable yield, not the efficient level of effort. Apart from the maximum sustainable yield already being inefficiently large, there are additional reasons to reduce allowable catch. First, in practice, there is plenty of uncertainty in determining fish stocks. which means that optimal allowances should be set lower as precaution, because the error of underestimation of the stock and subsequent underfishing is easier to adjust in the next year than the potential damage from overestimation of the stock and overfishing. In addition to the complications with uncertainty, there is the problem of shifting baselines. That is, as worded by Myers and Worm, management schemes are usually implemented well after industrialized fishing has begun and only serve to stabilize fish biomass at low levels. For further illustration of this idea, I recommend a TED Talk by Enrik Salle.